Hi everybody. Can you see me? I think you can still see me. I think I'm going to be good for this one. So this is my book This is my video on Egyptian gods, and I don't want to make this video like horribly long, so I'm going to split it up into two parts. This is part one. And so this book, Egyptian Paganism for Beginners. I really like it. It's a book about how to invoke them and invoke the gods and how to use them, and it talks about taking on the form of gods and other stuff, and that'll be included in my Egyptian magic video. That's my cat. My Egyptian magic video, and that is later to come. But my Egyptian gods video, I'm going to talk about a couple of gods out of this book. I'm going to focus mostly on the males today, and we'll talk about the females in the second half of the book. And so, in honor of Day of the Dead, which was, I believe, yesterday, but by the time you see this, it was last week, we are going to start with a god of death, Osiris. So let's start with Osiris. Okay. So this is a picture of Osiris. This is Osiris. Osiris, god of the dead. Osiris died actually in a very treacherous way. His brother tricked him into climbing into a coffin, and there's like different myths on this, but somehow he got chopped up into a million pieces and was scattered, well, not a million pieces, but he got chopped up, arms, legs, body, everything was just disassembled and scattered throughout Egypt. And the god Anubis, hold on, I'm trying to find a picture of him for you. Nefertiti, Anubis actually helped find him. And Anubis is most commonly known as the jackal god or the dog god, but Anubis is actually a god of the dead. He actually leads people through the afterlife and such and such. Another male god is one that you might be familiar with which is I'm trying to find one. Imhotep. You don't really know. You might not really know about him, but let me see. You might know of Horus. Horus is actually a moon god. Horus is the son of Osiris and Isis. Horus fights a great war with his uncle, who is Set, the god of darkness. And this war is like, it's a big deal, because Set wants to be the power of Egypt, and so he kills Osiris. At this time, Isis did not have a child. She created one after Horus was dead, and that's actually a different myth for a different day. Hold on, I'm sorry, the camera's moving. It's propped up, and I had to fix that. But that's actually a different myth. But Osiris was born after Osiris' death, so Seth didn't know about him. And so Isis went in hiding in marsh fields to protect her and her child. And this is a myth that I've heard. If you've heard something different, please share, comment below. This is just the myth that I've heard, though. She went in marsh fields hiding to protect her and her son. And she'd occasionally go out to get supplies and food and such. But we'll talk about Isis more when female section. Another god is Thoth. Thoth, the Ibis god. Thoth is a scribe of the gods. Thoth is also a god of wizardry or witchcraft. He's there's nothing that Thoth doesn't know. There's actually a book of Thoth, which is said to be mythological, but the Egyptians being so big on magic, I don't think it's mythological. I just think they haven't found the text for it yet, or the text has all been destroyed. But there is a book called the Book of Thoth, and it's apparently a collection of spells that should only be read by the gods. There was actually a myth that a man found the book, an ancient Egyptian prince found the book, and he read the spells. And to punish him, Thoth threw his wife and child into the ocean, into the Nile, and they drowned. But the man still went home with the book, but he never made it back alive because by the time he had gotten there, Thoth had killed him too. And the story said that the Book of the Dead was buried with him in a secret tomb. So I believe it. But there's nothing that Thoth doesn't know. You can also see him as a god of divination. Because Thoth is a god of divination. He invented some types of divination that we know. The Egyptians had runes, I want to say, but they're not because they were in hieroglyphs that they would throw that each had a meaning. And Thoth was said to have created these runes. If I could find some, I would definitely buy it. There's a bird. I would buy some because these are supposed to have great, great power. The Egyptians also had this thing about words, and it goes back to something I said in a video earlier. It was that names and words had power. Like if you could get a god's true name, then besides what they were known by, you could have great power over that god. So like Thoth isn't his real name; it's his Greek name, but his Egyptian name is something totally different. And if you could find that name, you could have I guess it's not. It's common knowledge now because most people know it. But if you could find his true name, it would have great power over him. Talking over that, let's talk about what other gods can we talk about? Let's talk about Ra. Or Ptah. Ptah is a creator god, and Ptah has this connection to Atum and Ra. And Atum is the all-seeing spirit. He's said to control all unknown forces. So something like karma or something. Well, no, not like karma. Because the Egyptians didn't have a thing like karma, but he controls uncontrolled forces. So the strength of a storm or the luck of somebody, he controls something like that. He's the unseen power behind stuff. So Ptah, Ra, the sun god and the king of the gods, and we'll talk about him next because there's a lot of information on him. And Ptah all have a connection. They're all seen as creator gods, and all gods have the ability to create. But these gods specifically are known for creating the gods. Atum and Ptah are known for creating the gods by making them out of clay and then breathing life into them. And Ra is known for the Eye of Ra. The story goes that Ra had lost his son and daughter, Nut and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut. Shu is the god of air. Tefnut is the goddess of water. He had lost them, and so he pulled pulled out one of his eyes and told his eyes to go look all around the world for him. By the time the eye came back, he had already found them. And he'd already grew a new eye. So there was no place for the eye of Ra. And so the eye of Ra cried, and from those tears grew humans. I never really questioned the myth. That's how we came to be. That's just my opinion. But Amun, you can also hear his name seen as Amun-Ra, because Amun is sort of the unseen one. He's the behind the scenes guy. Like, he's the guy, like, if the guys have a problem, Amun, it's most likely associated with Amun. We have Ra, the sun god, and I want to say something about the Eye of Ra, but that would be more of the goddess video. Who else? We have Jed, the earth god, and it's actually very funny because when people talk about Jed, they talk about Jed and Tepnut. And in Wicca, it's Mother Earth and Father Sky, but in Egyptian magic, it's completely switched. It's Father Earth and Mother Sky. Yes, right. Father Earth and Mother Sky. And so usually when you see a depiction of Jed, you'll see him laid underneath Tepnut as she is arched over him. Now, there's actually a myth between these two that Shu has to stand in between these two because Jed and Tepnut are sisters, and they came into the world entangled in one another. And Ra, who is Shu and Tepnut's grandfather, took Tepnut for a wife, and he was enraged that Jed and Tepnut were all constantly entangled in one another. So Ra sent Shu to stand in between the two to forever separate them. There's also like another myth that makes no sense with this, that how does it go? That every day Ra is born again, and he was born through the Sky Mother, and how does it go? No, she eats the sun in the morning, her face is in the east, and she gives birth to it at night, and yeah, that happens in the west. So it's just like, the mythology is very different because each Egyptian kingdom believes something different about the gods, but they all had mostly the same gods. Let me see how I'm doing on time. Alright, keep going. Let's talk about Osiris. Let's talk about the creation myth, because that's a big myth if you're going to understand anything. So the myth goes that there was a sea of darkness, and from that sea of darkness rose the sun god Ra, who created himself just with his own thoughts. Now let's just discuss that little chunk. To create something from nothing, just with your own thoughts, is an extremely magical power. So, which goes to say that the Egyptians were an extremely magically based society, and it was true. There wasn't too much. I mean, just like the Romans were very magically based, as they didn't really see it as magic. They just saw it as them giving worship. They were very magically based, and another thing is that, so he rose from the sea of darkness, which in itself, Nun, which is the name of the lake of darkness, the sea of darkness, Nun, is a god before that the other gods go to for answers when they have a question if they don't know how. And I think that can be taken into divination too, because if you get a black scrying mirror or a black scrying bowl and you fill it with water, you've created your own Nun or Nun. It's your own bowl of answers, your own water of answers. And that also goes to say something for the element of water, because it's, you rose from water, black water, water, the element of life, the element that runs through everything that lives, fish, all animals, plants, whatever. If it lives, it has water in it, and it's actually, it says a lot. But he rose from the sea of none on the eternal mound. The eternal mound is a metaphor, and you see a lot of metaphor and symbolism in mythology, but you see even more in Egyptian mythology. He rose from the sea of none on the eternal mound. The eternal mound is a representation of the goddess Ma'at. And let me find a picture of her. Ma'at is actually the goddess of truth and social justice and righteousness. And it is said that when you pass to the afterlife, your heart will be weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Hold on. Ma'at. This is her. She's also known as a teenage goddess. But it is said that when you pass through the 12 gates of, or is it the 42 gates? The 42 gates of the afterlife, because there's something called the 42 negative confessions, and at each one of these gates, a different God is going to ask you a different question, and you have to answer this question correctly to get on to the afterlife. And they're not like trivia questions. They're like questions like, did you sleep with someone else's wife? And where your answer is obviously no. Did you sleep with somebody else's husband? No. It's just questions like, have you ever stolen something in your life? No. Have you lied or cheated? Just questions like that. If you answer these questions correctly, you get on to the afterlife. But the afterlife is sort of the part where you can and can't cheat. It depends on who you are. Because reading through the dead text, I found like spells that they have had for people in the afterlife where they give their heartstone to Ma'at, and the heartstone is usually a scare that they're buried with. They give their heart scare to Ma'at or Anubis, but before they give it to them, they say this prayer, and this prayer is basically saying, okay, heart, don't tell them that I lied to get to this part. And so it does. And so there's this, but it's like you have to have done enough wrong in your life to get in. It's actually a very crazy thought, because your heart cannot be lighter than the feather of Ma'at, but it can't be heavy. It has to be just right. And if it isn't, it is fed to Mut or Mut. And Mut is sort of a beast that eats the hearts of those who are seen unfit to enter the eternal life. Now let's keep going. Ma'at, and so he rose from the sea of none on the platform of Ma'at, or the eternal mount, which means he rose on the standing of truth and justice and compassion for all beings. And he breathed out Shu, the god of air, and he sneezed out Tefnut, the goddess of air. The goddess of sea. And from Shu and Tefnut, you get Osiris. From Shu and Tefnut, you get Osiris, Isis, Jed, Set. That's wrong. From Shu and Tefnut, you just get two more gods. You get Jed and Nut. And from Nut and Jed, you get Osiris, Isis. Who else do you get? Isis. Set, and Set. I'm trying to think of the last one. I'm trying to think. Isis, Osiris, Set. Anubis. There you go. Anubis and Isis' twin sister Nefertiti. I think that's all five of them. I can't list them right now. I would have to go look back in my spell book, but yeah, that's all five of them. So, like I said, Isis and Nefertiti are sisters, and Isis being a moon god, Nefertiti is the dark moon, and so we'll discuss that when we get to the girls part. But but I know you're probably thinking back to the early part of the video when I said, you know, that Anubis took, that Ra took Tefnut for his wife. He did. And so, Anubis knew, Ra knew that Jed and Nut were secretly having an affair. So what Ra did was he laid a curse on Nut. And the curse was that you could not have kids for 363 days of the year. And so Nut went to Thoth and told her of this curse and asked him to help. And what he did was he won light from the moon and made an extra day of the year. 365 days of the year. And so she could have her kids in 2 days. It was, yeah, it's a lot of mythology. But, and this is sort of where the new generation takes in little brothers. This is sort of where the new generation of gods take in. You also have to think of the Eye of Ra, which is a group of gods in themselves. It consists of Hathor, Beset, and Sekhmet. All three of my goddesses are the Eye of Ra. So, like, if I ever just want to pray to all three of them, I'll say, "Oh, mighty Eye of Ra, shine down your light upon me," because the Eye of Ra is essentially the sun. But I'm sorry about this little pauses. The Eye of Ra, I already told you the myth about that. But from the Sea of Nun rose Shu and Tefnut, and from Shu and Tefnut we get Jed, the earth, and Nut, the sky. And Shu is stuck in between them, and that actually goes to say something else too. Because Shu and Tefnut, air and water, Jed and Nut, sky. These things are elemental things that they saw every day. You know, they saw the earth mixing with the water, and they saw sandstorms all the time, and they saw the beautiful, beautiful sky, because they didn't have all the bright lights that we have. And so, the myth goes on to say that Ra came down to earth. So this is after the Eye of Ra has created people. Ra came down to earth to rule as king. And he ruled for many, 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 many years until his human body started to get old, because his divine spirit was trapped in a human body that he had created. The body stayed young for a very long time, and so but the body eventually became old, as all human bodies must. And so one day he had heard of an uprising, and the people of his kingdom, they thought that he couldn't lead them anymore because he was too old, and they were talking about overthrowing him. And so what Ra did was that he went to his daughter, the Eye of Ra, and in this particular part of the story, she takes the form of Sekhmet. She takes the form of Sekhmet, and she, essentially what he does is he sends her down to punish the humans. Now, Sekhmet is the goddess of sickness, war, and healing. And the reason she's the goddess of sickness and healing is because she was said to control the demons that cause sickness, which means that she could always call back the demons. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, Sekhmet was a goddess of a lot of things. She's also the goddess of lions. Sekhmet. yeah, there's a lot to be said about her. But Ra sent her down, and she was wreaking havoc. She was killing people, killing people, killing people, killing people. And Ra was down, and he took pity on these people as they called for him. And so Ra told Tefnut to come back. And Tefnut, just being the little brat that she is, she said no. And so Ra asked for three of his fastest servants. He told them to go get some dirt that was red and mix them with 99 gallons, 99 barrels of, barrels of beer. And they poured them into the river. And so the next day, the next day, Sekhmet came down, and she thought it was blood. And Sekhmet being the war goddess and the goddess of sickness, and she just being mad all the time, she enjoys the taste of blood. Being the goddess of war and all of that, she enjoys the taste of it. So she bends down and she drinks it, thinks it was blood, and she drinks it all, drinks it. And from this, she becomes heavily intoxicated. So instead of being an angry goddess, she becomes a more docile, more feminine goddess, also known as Hathor. Also known as Hathor. Hathor. She becomes Hathor. Now, Beset is seen as her sister or a form of her because Beset is said to have evolved from Sekhmet, and Beset has her part in the story, but it's holy water. It's not a very it is a very big part because Beset was said to have slayed the serpent Apet, and Apet is a pet is the god, is not a god, but it's the serpent of wickedness and evil. So, Beset was said to have slain that. And the reason I think that is because if you've ever seen an Egyptian cat called the Ma, an Egyptian temple cat, they tend to hunt snakes. Yeah. So, and the Ma, or any form of cat, if I can find mine, is a sacred cat to the goddess. So, yeah. Leah, come here, boy. Come here, boy. Come here, little kitty. And I know that my cat, I've actually given as offered to both Sekhmet and Beset. He's getting his clothes ready. I don't do that. He only likes it when he has a toy that blue later on. But I've given them cat food and, catnip as an offering all the time, and they love it. This is Leo. Say hi, Leo. Say hi. Hathor is actually, but she is not a cat goddess. She is actually seen as the cow goddess, which says something about her because, which also goes back to that Wicca thing. Wiccans see the cow as the male aspect, whereas in this story, it's seen as the feminine aspect, and the reason for that is because a cow is actually a very docile creature. A cow doesn't care. A cow doesn't really hurt anyone. A bull does, and a bull represents the sun god Ra. But yes, my cat, he's thinking about climbing up on the altar. Don't climb up there. And so you get Hathor from that. And so then comes the creation of Isis, Nefertiti, I forget. I think it's Nefertiti. Who else? Nefertiti.